Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Conscious Leadership Network Spotlight Edition. I am Nesha Zackery, the COO of the CLN and Authority Establishment. Over here we have Pallas, the CEO and the founder of the CLN, and we have Alex with us today. So Pallas, I'm going to turn this over to you to introduce us to Alex.
Hi guys, so this is Alex TD, as he likes to be called, and he is just a really super awesome human being. And Alex found us early on, when we were putting together, just starting to put together the CLN, and he's seen so many different iterations of what we've been putting together, and he's hung in there, and he has totally grasped the big picture of what we're doing and the network and the people in here. And Alex is here today to predominantly talk about his journey and really what has connected him with the CLN, why this community, why these people who you're connecting with are going to be or are and impacting your life, and really how you can be an impact on everybody else's. And it's, the way I kind of like to talk about his journey is coming from a more, mainstream way of living, mainstream way of thinking, showing up in the world, and then how many of us who dived into the alternative modalities of healing, alternative ways of working with trauma, of seeing the world, we show up in a very different spiritual aspect of where we started. And so this is Alex. So hi there, Alex, and why don't you start with giving us some background on you?
Hi there. Thank you, Nesha. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Pallas, good to see you again. So a little bit of background in about as small a nutshell as I can manage. Roughly 3.5-ish years ago, I was going through, I suppose what it's called, the dark night of the soul. And I remember walking home from work one day, and I was walking up to the apartment door, getting my keys out, and I swear to God, I heard something whisper like right behind me, and it was like, "Dark night of the soul." And I just stopped and I froze. And I looked behind me, and there was like nothing there. And I about peed my pants because I swore it was like right there. And I had never heard that word before. So, what do most people do when they don't know something? They go and search it on the internet. And I had found a pretty thorough description about it. And just from what it was describing, I wasn't really sure about a lot of the spiritual kind of woo-woo aspects of it, because that's not really the world that I come from. I come from a cradle Catholic, born into Roman Catholicism from birth. And that's, my entire maternal family is that way also. Including my mom. There's 4 brothers, 4 sisters. So there's, it's pretty well reinforced by that point. And so when reading through that description, I didn't recognize how that was going to play out over the next 1.5 years. And I would say that just on a psychological, emotional level, that was also the year where I had experienced the most intense depression as well. And there was just a number of major life events that were negatively impacting me and my life. And that was very difficult to cope with and tolerate. I kind of managed okay, but it was pretty it was a pretty harrowing experience, to say the least. So kind of jumping through, I ended up finding an event to go to, and I cut out of a weekend business meeting in Chicago a day early to go to this event. And that kind of kickstarted a lot of what I know today. So I went to that event. It was April 2018. And then the following weekend, there was a 3-day event in New York that I went to. And then that summer, I got accepted to completion process training, my title here. And then I volunteered a couple of events. I went to a few more events, and it's kind of like one of those hot seat type formats where you get called up on stage and you talk to the host. And so I've been on that a few times as well. And just earlier this year, like 2 or 3 months ago, this year was really the first time that I ever felt like it was okay to really absorb what was happening. Like it was the first time it was really safe to do that.
Can you talk a little bit about what was happening? If you're comfortable with that.
Like early on or recently?
Or in this process, kind of where you're at, trying to kind of be with what's happening versus pushing it away.
So one of the main elements is that I like you mentioned, kind of growing up in mainstream Muggle world. I was born and raised Roman Catholic. So like New Age spiritual stuff, those are the kind of people you pray to Jesus for. I have a decade in the military. I had a good community involvement where I was living at. I had a good management position, and then also having a handful of other business ventures kind of percolating on the side. And the base of that structure, I guess, was the weakest. So my career and all of those kinds of things is what kind of crashed. So like in the tarot cards, the tower moment, like that was that moment in my life, was the tower just come crashing down. And the one that I've been talking about recently is kind of absorbing the shock, and for a long time denying it, absorbing the shock of like how is like what's going to happen, what's going to happen with the dynamic between me and my family, because they're the majority, and at this point I'm basically like a black sheep where what's going on with Alex, is he okay, what's happening, has he gone off the deep end, kind of a thing. And
in there.
So that's sort of what leads me to today.
So I think in looking at some of the things you shared with us previously,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about, or the best tip to share with the group. And you said to recognize when you're in pain, which to me, it sounds like that's kind of a segue to where you're at with these other things that you're talking about. Can you go from there and a little bit about the completion process?
Mm-hmm. So the acronym of PAIN is something that I learned from my instructor, and it stands for pay attention, integrate now. And integration is a key component of the completion process. It's a shadow work process, and it's designed to reacclimate the past trauma into the present, and then move that present. So once that comes into place, then moving that into a space of resolution, finding and creating that resolution, and then integrating it with conscious awareness. So this is a conscious process through and through. There's a number of healing modalities where, as my grandma would used to say, you can just give it up to God and you don't have to worry about the details. However, I feel that, like, in acute situations where you're just like, I don't know what to do, what's going on, I think those are very viable solutions. But as far as like spirituality is concerned, I find that when possible, garnering awareness, or some of the older teachings would talk about garnering spiritual wisdom, which I think is what we call awareness nowadays. So having ability to bring that through consciously, I think, is a big component for it's not really an evolution of human anymore, because it's going kind of slow. So I think it's more of a revolution at this point, where we got to build some momentum to really get it going.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so then, I mean, the trauma work, that's really where so much of this alternative medicine, alternative modalities, the spiritual, these sides go. It goes to that core trauma of, really, it's the core trauma of what gave the false assumption that we're separate from source.
Mm-hmm.
And that when we have that assumption of source, of the universe, of whatever terminology that you want to put in there, then that's when fear can come in and take over from whatever those interference patterns are that come into play. And the deep trauma work, like that core trauma of humanity, is where pretty much, most of us in these transformational practices ultimately go. So with that, with you and the CLN, how do these two things come together for you?
First and foremost, I don't really believe that I would have stumbled this direction had I not done a lot of the completion process for myself. There's a number of things that were core traumas for myself that I had no awareness of previously. And so when those moments of pain pop up, or like an emotional trigger, being able to process that through that, and create a conscious awareness of what's behind that really, and then utilizing that to kind of unlock my free will, so to speak, and to make conscious decisions that are no longer anchored by this like deterministic, heavily reinforced conditioning, especially the kind that's done by our family and society, let alone work cultures and other societal factors. And so going through that the last couple of years or so, I think is what has made it possible for me to even stumble in the direction of Conscious Leadership Network in the first place. I recall being in Bella Crystal's group with the human design gene keys, kind of bridging those two modalities together, and just trying to get some kind of grasp on my new self, basically. And she had invited me to this CLN. I'm like, what's that? And she described it in a way that was like, I feel the need to explore that. And at the exact same time that happened, I was also in the process of kind of withdrawing and getting rid of my big social media accounts, except for YouTube because I have a channel on there. So no more Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. And it was kind of like what did they call it? Divine timing kind of a moment where it just helped me segue out of the big social media that's just this like energy sucking vacuum of a black hole and into Conscious Leadership Network that seemed to be more of stable is the first word that comes to mind. Remember that tower card moment that I mentioned a while ago? I feel like this is kind of where those pieces are starting to fall into place. So anything that was kind of left over in the rubble from my tower card moment, I think this is kind of where some of those pieces are meant to be placed at this time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's terrific. That's a lot. Because the people that you're finding in the CLN are more aware, I guess, really of these other ways of being. I guess can you talk a little bit about what is your connection with the community in there? Why is this more of a safe place for you to grow, explore, do the things that you're doing?
I think the first thing that I noticed was the level of receptivity. I'm not used to that. I'm used to things just kind of being put out and then kind of done and over with. The second thing I would say I noticed was the ease of expectations, where all my life I've been in environments where the expectation was to insert old adage here, pay your way, the idea of pulling your weight. If you're not here, then get out. Like, or if you're not in it, then get out. Or no free ride, or any of those kinds of things. And so, and I was coming in a few months ago from a pretty like emotionally wounded place still. Even after having done a significant amount of completion process and other kind of parts work, healing, inner child stuff, there is still a lot of tender rawness that was like, I'm trying to remember what my instructor told me the last event that I went. Oh, it was like an emotional car wreck victim is what she was telling me. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of where that shock and denial comes from. And just like any kind of that idea that any little thing that happens, it hurts. So there's that sensitive rawness still. And so then stumbling into the CLN was kind of a reprieve for me. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I see that there's a bunch of people doing stuff. What am I supposed to be doing? Nothing right now. Okay, I guess if that's okay. I'll hang out here for the time being and just try to get a grasp on what's going on and try to recover also in the meantime. That's definitely still happening. But with certain stages of recovery, there also becomes other activities or capabilities that become available in those different stages. And I think that brings me to where I'm starting to be able to see myself going, specifically within the CLN, where even just in the past couple of months, specifically the past couple of months, I've noticed that there's more like mental bandwidth to participate in a different way than I was before. Because before I was just kind of lurking in the background and kind of overcompensating by finding ways to participate in the different posts that the hosts were making, and now it's like, hey, do you want to make something? And so this handful of different chances to do something, to make something new, it's playing a big role in my life at this point, where I'm able to see myself actually being involved in making something new.
So is it the creation process itself that's drawn you out? Because you're one of the first people that I noticed in the group, because your conversation is always like really deep and it's meaningful and thoughtful. It's not like you say, like you were just like forcing the interest or the activity or like trying to compensate. And to me, it just felt like, okay, this is somebody who, okay, he may not fully know where he's going, but he knows where he is right now. And now I see you like starting to show up and like really step out there. So is it the opportunity to create your own that's made you like really step up and out, or is there something else that's like kind of dragging you out there?
It's a little bit similar to the illustration of like a rescue animal, where like with a rescue animal you can't like push him out too far too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing that, and I think that comes back to the receptivity being the first thing that I noticed, was that I wasn't being forced in one direction or another. I wasn't being pushed back or pushed out for doing anything or for doing nothing, which, when I've been in environments where that can happen all the time, the amount of confusion between that dichotomy, pulls you in one direction or the other, and that
Right.
can be very stressful, to say the least. And so then being able to like naturally come forward,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that receptivity is there. I think if anybody's seen the movie Unleashed with Jet Li, they would have a pretty good concept of what I'm getting at. It's the same idea of just gradually allowing someone to come forward as they're able to, without pushing or forcing it. Yeah.
I like that. Okay. Pallas.
Unmute myself. So I think one of the things I'd like to hear a little bit more from you about is, you had said one of the things that it's not a hobby, it's an interest, it's how spirituality can make things suck less on a physical and practical level. Can you go down
Can you
that
repeat the
down
question?
that
I
path a little
kind of
bit?
got distracted by the laughing.
You had said it's one of your hobbies or
Yeah.
interests, kind of outside of your job, and you said how spirituality can make things suck less on a physical and
Okay.
practical level. I love how you said that, because I would be
Yeah.
pretty much like that too.
So more often than not, I've noticed that upwards of 90% of those who make their way towards spirituality, even religion, do so for the sake of finding some kind of relief. There's something going on in their life that they can't get normal answers to in the general way of things. And so there needs to be this kind of otherworldly option for people to access new and different information. And in my days of going to church and being part of the Catholic Church, and being involved with the tradition, there was a lot of questions that went unanswered for a lot of people that I knew, and the priests didn't seem to have a substantial answer, and so it seemed like this default was always coming back to something to do with a Bible verse or something to do with cataclysmic teaching of some form. And even just going to church in the last couple of years, I've noticed that people are showing up like wounded and in pain, and it's almost tangibly in the air now. Well, like for me now, it's like it's almost tangible in the air, where there's kind of this hope that they're going to be able to do like what my grandma says, give it up to God when they go into the church and they go through that hour sermon. But then by the end of it, they're leaving with that same thing that they came in with, and there's like this despair and disappointment that happens. And so then, I don't know, maybe that's what keeps them coming back, is that hope or something along those lines. But as far as kind of the new age spiritual, like woo-woo type stuff, there's some pretty cool stuff that's available, I've found. And of the things that are available, a lot of it's really helpful. And the idea of, I mean, I like being head up in the clouds as much as the next, dreamer or idealist or whomever. But with the amount of time that I spent in my family's culture and the military, I also have developed a strong sense of sensibility and rationale, and that's where things need to become more practical. Things need to become, it's like, okay, like that's great, it's up here, you can say all these wonderful words and sound really cool and wise, but welcome to Earth. So how do we make things work here with what we've got, kind of a thing? And it's hard. Some of the solutions are simple, but it's hard, especially considering where many of us are at in our lives at any given point. And I think it's just that people need help, and they're either they don't know where to get it from, or they're scared to ask for it. And I think that's one of those things that is creating some of the collective pain that we're experiencing so emphatically in 2020, is that people have been holding on to and carrying this pain without really knowing what to do with it. And if they do have some idea of what to do with it, they're like scared or ashamed to go get that help. Because like me, they're scared of what people are going to think. I've got four men, four women on my maternal family that kind of makes up the consensus of my family. And if the consensus is, oh, he's crazy, he's gone off the deep end, then that creates some bigger problems for a lot of people. And that makes it not worth the risk, which is a shame. But going back to the collective pain that's coming into this year in 2020, I think is one of those elements that people are waking up to, is that, hey, something's not right, even if I don't know what it is, or if I do know what it is, that's great. Something's got to give. Something's got to change. And there's plenty of people like that here in the CLN that recognize that and are doing what they can to at least offer solutions that people very genuinely need.
So if there are people on the outside that are going through, they're on the same path that you've been on, and they're out on the outside looking in, what would you tell them about the CLN, like to help them figure out if it's the right place for them?
Get in, first of all. And there's no, like, there is the risk of getting in, first and foremost, is not it's not high at all. Like, it's very low risk. And I think that is a key element to help people recognize that it's safe to get in the first place. And once they're in, deciding what level of activity or participation that they're okay with, and then sticking to that. Because, and the reason why I'm saying sticking to that is because it's not normal social media. And when people have been on Google or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, all these other platforms, when they've been on them for so long, it becomes difficult to switch gears to something new. And with the way that the internet is currently going, especially with blockchain technology and cryptocurrency and blah blah blah, we're experiencing something of a renaissance with the internet as well. And the kind of new things popping up, it's happening already. And so it's going to take a concerted effort for people to be like, oh, I was part of this conscious leadership network. That's what's the app called? Mighty Networks. So it's like making the conscious effort to check in, once, twice, 3 times a week with the app, and participating in the way that they decided that they were going to participate. And in doing that, they're going to find either A, that this is on some level rewarding to them, that they feel inclined to continue this new activity, or they're going to, for one reason or another, decide that it's not for them, and that's okay, because at the very least they know about it now, and so that seed has been planted. And if they decide at a later time that, hey, I kind of wonder what's going on with that thing that I kind of sort of did back that one time, then they can come back to it, and we'll all be here, and there will be even more things here for them to look into, to access, to read, to watch, to get services and help from. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
I love it. So how do you help people, like, now that you've gotten into the CLN and you started thinking about like what your next step is? What is your next step like for getting people to you, and how can you help them, whether in the CLN, outside of the CLN? What is it that you do to help people get down that path?
The simplest, this just came to me last night too. The simplest way I think to describe what it is I do is a psycho-emotional guide,
Wow.
with a more of an emphasis kind of on like the spiritual side of things. Just because things can get weird, and we try to make that as okay and valid as possible, so
Right.
that people feel safe to be vulnerable. Because I mean, the kinds of things that I help people work through ranges from, you got your hand slapped by sticking it in the cookie jar, and now you feel blocked to get something in your life nowadays, all the way up to complex trauma that is almost unspeakable in public settings. So it can be light at times, and it can get pretty deep and pretty heavy. And one of the kind of gateway or entry steps that I'm currently working on to bring into the Conscious Leadership Network is my own tribe. And it's aptly named the Deep End. So I know that that feeling of like, am I crazy? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? What the hell's going on? That's what the Deep End is intended to be for. Is it doesn't have to be crazy or scary to go into that, because all of those kinds of things, that fear of the unknown, it's part of the unconscious. It's a part of what we're not yet aware of. And besides public speaking, that's probably like the second biggest unknown fear known to mankind, is the unconscious, the unknown. And I want people to know that it's okay to explore those spaces, because those spaces are in fact them. And without exploring those spaces, we continue to withhold the things that are inside of us. And I've been talking with someone recently that I've done a lot of work with, how depression is a withholding of the things that are inside of us, good or bad, and expression is the expelling of the things that are within. So, like, so many people in, especially like the United States, you can see, are depressed. They're depressed. The level of depression is astronomically high, recognizably high this year. And we're seeing this because people are stuck in their homes. They're around people that they may or may not like. A lot of people that are younger have had to move in with their families, or people that they may or may not like. Probably they don't. And so now that there's this collective withholding going on, and that depression has become very noticeable. And there aren't too many safe places for people to express what they're holding on inside. I have another friend out in New York who just in the last couple of days mentioned how there's so many things inside and I don't know how to get it out. Well, as far as the context of the group, the tribe, or their movements, they're called, right? Yeah. Okay. So they were once tribes, now movements. So within the context of the deep end movement is to give people a place to start to learn how to express those kinds of things. And whether it's a slow release valve or a open the floodgates kind of thing, learning how to get it out and learning to explore the things that are coming out so that there's less depression, so that people have awareness of what's happening, so that people have a chance to ask for and receive help, so that people have a chance to heal and have a life that no longer sucks as bad as it once did. And I think that ties back into Pallas's previous question about how to make things suck less. Because there's any number of things on any given day that people are like, oh, this is horrible. Oh, this sucks. And I do believe that spirituality has the capacity to address those things and to bring resolve and solutions to those things. It just takes a little bit of time. People need to step back from the hustle and bustle that we've created in the modern world to be able to do those things. And oftentimes people don't have the time or the space to do that. And that's part of what the deep end is here to provide also.
That's really exciting. That is so needed, because I know that in my own journey of my health challenges and the things, my journey back to health, it ultimately took a tribe. It took my tribe of healers, of people that I can connect with to help me find my voice, to be able to have dialogue around myself, to be able to make a safe space for me to talk about the crazy stuff that I'm going through. That in traditional mainstream, if I present that, they'll be like, here's a drug, or we should probably commit you, right? Because the thing is that most people, like more people than not, when they allow themselves to connect to the fact that they are experiencing these things and know they're actually not crazy, but they may not know that they're not crazy until they start talking with others, help them create language around that experience, that's where the journey can begin. And what you're doing is you're creating a groundwork. You're creating those, you're laying those first bricks for somebody to come in and take a step forward. It might be scary as heck. They might be ready to jump in either place. Like, it's so important. And that's one facet of this network that we're creating of opportunities for people to connect and to be able to learn more about who they are and move into that trauma, move into that exploration of what they are not, so that they can move back to, or maybe move to for the first time, not sucking.
Yeah, and I guess I want to make a distinction about trauma itself. Oftentimes people will say that they don't need help because they weren't traumatized by something, but the stigma around trauma is that it was something major, like you were in a car accident or you watched somebody die or ritual abuse, and so like there's this expectation that there's like a really high threshold for trauma, but really what trauma is anything that didn't have a resolution to it. And that's why I mentioned previously something as simple as getting your hand slapped but trying to get a cookie from the cookie jar, because that can be something that traumatizes a child for the rest of their life. And the amount of trauma that happens around the world before the age of 10, 11, 12 is disgustingly high. Dysfunction, unfortunately, is a norm amongst families and such. And it's kind of the unspoken elephant in the room, so to speak. And collectively, I think people are starting to recognize this slightly more this year, being in that depressive state that we mentioned before.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an excellent description of that, because you're right. You say the word trauma and people think traditional hardcore trauma. They don't recognize the bigger picture of what that is. So Alex, oh my gosh, there's so many more places that we can go with you with these conversations. I'm really, really excited, these avenues that are really opening up. But we've gone longer than expected, and it's been on purpose, and it's been amazing, and I'm really excited. So I think that we should probably go ahead and wrap up for the day, for today, and we'll definitely have to have another one following up to this. But how can people reach you? So how, like, if they're going to find you in the CLN, how do they connect with you? How do they connect with you outside of the CLN? Because I am sure that you're going to resonate with a lot of folks out there.
So I'm mildly on the reclusive side of things. I do have a YouTube channel that's been my ongoing hobby the past couple of years. It's called Ace of Fates, and it's all one word, ACEOFFATES. I do have Snapchat, so Ace of Fates and then the number 8. And then within the Conscious Leadership Network, I also am a top member in there, so it's pretty easy to find me. ALEX_T-D, and you can say hi, which is the CLN's version of sending a private message. You can find me on any number of posts that I'm replying to. And in the near future, we'll be opening up the deep end for others to either wade into or dive into. So
that's awesome. Well, I'm glad I had a chance to meet you finally face to face.
Yeah.
Kind of, sort of.
Awesome. Okay, is there anything else you'd like to say, Nesha, about today, or kind of?
Nope, I'm good. I'm just glad we finally got to connect and do this, and share your vision of where you've come from, where you're going, and hopefully we get to see more of you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today, and we'll be bringing Alex back in the not too far future for our community spotlight, because he's a rock star and we love him.